And welcome back. Today we are talking about 5G. What is it? This impacts you. If you are listening to this radio show, this impacts you. And that seems to be something that's going to be happening everywhere around the world. And we are speaking to Patti Wood, and her organization is grassrootsinfo.org. So thank you so much for joining us to explain this very important and timely issue, Patti. Now, these 5G sites, I want to say that I've been hearing about them actually in the developmental phase for years. But I personally live in Oyster Bay, and the meeting I went to was in Huntington, where these supposedly small cell towers are already being plastered all over the entire town.
That's right. They have identified a few places around the country where they're actually piloting this technology. I believe Huntington is a location that was targeted, as well as Garden City on Long Island. And we are getting calls on a fairly regular basis. I would say probably half a dozen calls a week from people living in these areas that are just terribly upset by it. Just recently, I spoke to a woman, in fact, it was yesterday, who actually has a telephone pole in her backyard. And when she bought her house, she, that right of the access to the telephone pole was in there, utility access or easement, they call it. And so they were able to come directly onto her property, place a tower because they're, place a cell antenna right there in her backyard. Literally, she said, almost on top of her children's bedroom windows, and was just terribly, terribly concerned about this. These are, 5G doesn't mean that we're getting rid of 3G and 4G. We're just adding to it. It's another layer of wireless radiation that is being added to the environment. It's going to, it will utilize wireless frequencies already in use, but also will add those higher frequencies, which we talked about, the sub-millimeter and millimeter. And these are going to be on 24/7. 24/7. You cannot escape this.
Well, one thing I have to say is that there are activists here on Long Island, such as Debbie, who holds meetings in Huntington, who has been spending her days and nights visiting politicians' offices and screaming about this. And I have to say, she is getting somewhere, because she has actually sent me copies of letters from local politicians who say they are going to bring up the issue. So if we shout loud enough, we might be able to block this.
Well, let's just talk about this for a second. So the telecom industry, they, according to their language, I mean, they've had about enough of this, this local control bit where, they come in, they want to set up a network of these antennas, and you've got local governmental agencies saying, nope, we're not going to do that here, and no, the aesthetics of our historic downtown area is not going to be, ruined by the presence of all these antennas on the telephone poles, and that wireless companies do not want this. And so there's actually an act right now, several actual bills in the federal, in the federal government that are going to try to do away with any local control at all. Now, they have tried to do this in states, and 13 states have already agreed. They passed legislation to give the telecom companies complete control. Basically, it's just destroying home rule. It's gutting home rule, so that no local government has any say about where or when or if these cell towers get placed. And so we were able to fight this in California. It passed the legislature, and then it went to Governor Brown's desk for signature. And we were able to work with groups in California. We did a series of radio spots that ran in San Francisco, Sacramento, and Los Angeles, and Governor Brown eventually vetoed that bill. And then in New York State, it was just the same exact bill, gutting local control, taking away all control on the local level. was actually slipped into Governor Cuomo's budget. And it was very interesting that somebody from Florida actually said, did you read Governor Cuomo's budget? Because that same exact law that did not pass in California, but that has passed in 13 other states, is in the New York State budget. And so we really scrambled, and we got a tremendous, public awareness campaign out there and educated all the legislators, and they took it out of the budget. But, the telecoms have no patience for this. They don't want to go state by state by state by state.
They did not get that free access, although they're going up all over the place.
They are going up, but we do. But right now, what Debbie is doing in Huntington is still valuable because we still have local control. But if this federal law passes, or even any one of these federal laws on this issue passes, then we will have nothing. Our local leaders will have no say at all.
And it looks like they're intent on getting that through, so they'll just put it in bill after bill.
That's right. And there are going to be hearings next week in Washington on this, on this very, very issue that we are talking about, and that's taking away all local control and letting the telecom companies do whatever they want without any control at all on the state level, county level, town or village level.
Now, I know in Huntington, how can people look up and see if these supposedly small cell towers are there already? Because I am seeing them all over in Oyster Bay as well.
Well, they come in all different shapes and sizes. That's one of the things about these antennas. Every manufacturer makes them slightly different. So you can't look at one and say, oh, that's a 5G tower or that's a distributed antenna, system, because there are some of those as well. And so we can't tell you exactly what a 5G transmitter looks like. But it has to have some accompanying equipment with it, usually on the ground. There is a box of some kind, and that box could be as large as a refrigerator. And one of the things that we worry about with all of these antennas is that they co-locate, so that you have Verizon and AT&T and Sprint all on the same pole. Very industrial, looking. And if you want to talk about the aesthetics of a community, that is one way to fight it, at least at the moment.
For now.
The moment.
So I want you to know that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Patti Wood. You can find out more at grassrootsinfo.org. So it's very important for people to get involved if they want to have any kind of freedom of trying to block this. Of course, a lot of people don't want to block it because they want to have houses that, they can do everything from one button from.
Well, that's right. We were just up in Bronxville. There was a co-op building that had, many different co-op apartments in it. And AT&T had proposed putting cellular arrays on each corner of the roof. With both 4G and 5G transmitters. Okay, they're still putting in 4G. So 4G and 5G transmitters on all four corners. And AT&T came in and they did their dog and pony show, and they said that there were no health impacts whatsoever. It was only the heating or the thermal issue that I'm sure is the only thing that the FCC has ever considered, which is how close do you have to get to one of these large antennas before it burns your skin. And so they said there's no problem at all. No, everyone's going to be fine, blah, blah, blah. And I came in and I just said, know the facts. Here's all the research, 2 6-inch binders of the independent science on wireless radiation and human health. And let me leave these with you and just, spend a week doing your own study and your own research. And, you should be able to make a decision. You should be able to make it based on science. And so they did, and they turned them down. And it's very hard sometimes to turn them down because they want, they want to go into an area where people need the money. The landlord was thrilled to death that he was going to get, $3,000 a month for letting them use the roof of his building. What he didn't know was that AT&T could then allow other providers to co-locate on those same poles, and that they're going to charge Sprint and Verizon and whoever else wants to be on there. So they actually make money, and the $3,000 that they're giving to the landlord is only a piece of that they're making from co-location. But there are people who really are concerned about it. Now, there was a huge fight there in that co-op because some of the people wanted the money so that their monthly fees didn't go up when they needed a roof repair or brick repair or whatever, and they really fought it. They wanted the money. And that, I think, is one of the biggest factors. But that's not going to be a problem for these the telephone poles and the light poles.
Right, because those are already
they're already
owned.
there, and they're just waiting.
And they're getting government access by going to the towns. And from what I heard, these different organizations that own the towers and want to use them also are giving financial remuneration to the towns.
Some of them are, and some of them are not. It depends. All I know is that studies now have shown that property values are dropping 20% on homes that are near cell towers,
which is going to be pretty much every home.
Yeah, and would you buy a home with a mini cell tower in your front yard or your backyard? I wouldn't. I wouldn't go near it.
However, with the 5G, it seems like they'll be in every backyard.
They'll be in every backyard.
Because they're going to be much closer together.
People have to, this is not a time where you can just close your eyes and, just go on life as usual. There are many, many different issues that we need to make sure that we educate ourselves about, especially parents of young children, because as always, children are the most vulnerable. They're the most vulnerable to, toxins in, their environment and food, issues and so on, but they're also very vulnerable to this radio frequency radiation. And so if you've got, a couple of kids, young children in your home, and you've got a couple of smart meters on your house from the gas and the electric company, and a 5G transmitter in your front yard, and a couple of routers inside your home for your phones and for your internet connections, that's a lot of radiation.
It really is.
That's way too much radiation for a child's body.
Well, and I know you have the scientific data that you do share with others, and even though the industry is saying that there are no studies, there are. It's amazing that there are
thousands of studies.
Yeah,
thousands of studies on this particular issue.
So I want to thank you very much for being our guest today. And I want to tell our listeners, thank you for tuning into Herbally Yours once again, produced at the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. You can find out more at grassrootsinfo.org about this important issue in our area and around the world. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Herbally Yours is produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.